Hello and welcome everyone to episode 3 of Down to the Wire Sports Talk Show with Bernal. I'm your host, Bernal, and I'm just really astounded that we already are at episode 3. Really hoping you're enjoying this content. So if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure you hit a follow or subscribe button. You can also find this podcast on YouTube, where at my name, Bernal. So make sure you hit a subscribe to my YouTube channel, even hit a like on this video, and comment what you think of the content I've been producing, any feedback, etc. We have the hot streak keeping going here with a great guest. We have a guest today who I think will go down as a pioneer in the sports media realm for kind of using social media for breaking stories. He started at a young age and a senior in high school, breaking two big stories in MLB. First was Ricky Nolasco, going to the Minnesota Twins, and then the second big trade he broke which would give him probably kind of a lot of recognition to his name and help him kind of climb the ranks, was Doug Fister getting traded to the Washington Nationals from the Detroit Tigers. So he would later go on and study at North Carolina at Chapel Hill. So any Tar Heels listen to this podcast, where he would earn a bachelor's degree in journalism and then ultimately land the position he currently is in as a Boston Red Sox beat writer for MassLive. So Chris Cotillo, thanks for joining me, Chris.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. It's good to be here.
Definitely. Well, I know, like I said, as we're recording this, it's March 29th, so it's inch close towards the baseball on opening day. I hope this doesn't interfere with any breaking news as you got going on. I saw before as we hopped on.
If it does, I'll just hang out.
as we hopped on before we recorded, I saw you put a story out on the Red Sox trying to pursue Hector Rendon from the Phillies, as he just got bought out by the Phillies. But anyways, We'll jump right into it. As I ask every guest on my show, the beginning, what has your journey has been like? As I talked about previously, starting really young, kind of
right,
different for a lot of reporters, as a senior in high school, and then now currently writing for a big, well-known team in the MLB as the Boston Red Sox.
For me, it's just it's been a crazy, quick rise almost to the position I'm in. I started and like a lot of people growing up in Massachusetts, a big sports fan, and really enjoyed just everything that came with being a sports fan, being a Red Sox fan. And I always knew that I wanted to be in sports someday in some fashion, and ended up getting into the writing side of things. So for me, it was all about Twitter and social media, as you know, and trying to cultivate sources, trying to cultivate an audience through that. And after 5 years at SB Nation and 4 of those years in college in Chapel Hill, I was lucky enough to land with MassLive. And the beat has changed a lot, even in the 3 years I've been in it. But just trying to follow everything the Red Sox do, which most days is a lot. The last 2 days, as you know, have been busy, and hopefully the rest of the season will be like that too.
Yeah. So as I mentioned previously, you breaking 2 big stories as a senior in high school. What was a challenge like that as a senior in high school, trying to talk to general managers, agents, et cetera, trying to find the scoop of major breaking news, rumors, transactions?
It was just about having people trust someone who they didn't know, have them trust an 18-year-old high school student, because if Ken Rosenthal texts you or Jeff Passan texts you and you're an agent or a GM, you're probably going to respond. You're going to know, this guy's legit. He knows what he's talking about. With me, people had to take a leap of faith, and not just those potential sources, but also, all the people who ended up, like I just mentioned, Ken and Jeff and some other people, they credited me, which was a huge, huge thing. So, I've said forever, whenever anybody's asked me that question, the key, a lot of it was obviously, I put in hard work behind the scenes and stuff. But a huge part of it was the baseball media world could have just ignored, an 18-year-old getting those types of scoops and breaking stories. They could have just brushed it under the rug and said, "Oh, this guy's not part of the, the fraternity or whatever. Like, this is some kid, and we don't have to credit him." But luckily for me, all the professionals were, really acted like pros, and Ken was giving me credit, and Jeff and John Heyman and Bob Nightingale and all those guys were willing to credit me for the stories that I broke. And I've always been really appreciative. looking back, as time goes on, even more, just because they could have, like I said, acted like it didn't happen, acted like they had the scoops and they didn't. So that was really key to get the recognition from, the people who were and still are really the leaders in this field. And I'm always appreciative of that.
And now, do you feel, since you got that recognition, like you said, from Ken Rosenthal, Jeff Passan, two big reporters in Major League Baseball, how much did they help kind of give you advice to help you climb the ladders and just gain additional insight and knowledge about the industry?
Yeah, it's partly it's the direct advice. Ken has been a resource here and there. When I run into him, ask him about something or ask him a certain tip or what advice he'd have. And but a lot of it is just that indirect seeing what they do, seeing how they do their work. Seeing how they interact with people when one of them's at Fenway and see how they work a clubhouse or see how they're in the dugout talking to players or just seeing how they act on Twitter, the types of stories they're going after, the types of things, the way they phrase things. To me, that's a lot more valuable, and not just them, but also the veterans on the beat that I work with every day, whether it be Sean McAdam or Ian Brown, and some of those guys don't like when I call them veterans because it makes them sound old, but they are. Rob Bradford and even working with Chris Smith, seeing the way that he does the beat. He's only 10 years older than me, but he's been doing it a lot longer. So that's super valuable. And it's not a lot of the direct, like, what tips do you have? That's important sometimes too, but it's a lot of just the kind of lead by example. They probably don't even know they do it, but when you watch people and watch types of questions they asked or watch the day to day, you really do learn a lot.
Yeah. So going off of that, it sounds like you're talking a little bit about connections. So how valuable do you think it was for you, especially to be around these guys and just each week, each day, each game, just kind of build connection?
Yeah, it's definitely a lot different than the way I tried to do it, for the first few years when I was at SB Nation and I was, coming up through in, last couple of years of high school and then into college. As everybody knows, Chapel Hill's not anywhere close to a major league city. So I was doing everything virtually and everything over text, everything over email. And I had, 2 weeks a year where I had actual time to get to meet people. The All-Star game I went to every summer and the winter meetings, which is hugely important, still is. So a lot of it was done over that, over those types of things, over the phone. Now, obviously, well, before COVID and, on the Red Sox beat, a lot's done in person. You're in the clubhouse with the players every day. You're talking to the manager in person every day. You're around the beat every day in different cities and sometimes in 3 different cities a week. So in terms of fostering relationships, I think that's a more natural way to do it. Obviously, that's why, as everybody knows, it's been a lot harder to do that and build relationships in the Zoom world, but hopefully we're getting out of that. So yeah, just all those things are, it's trying to become, have better relationships with people every day on the beat is important. Trying to, whether you just say hi to somebody or introduce yourself to somebody for the first time, like just being around is really important. So I'm looking forward to getting back to that more than anything.
Yeah, great. And you talked about the pandemic kind of not being in person. Like, how has this shaped for you as a beat reporter, kind of only being like making Fenway your office basically? How has the pandemic shaped kind of the industry for you and the work you do for MassLive about the Boston Red Sox?
Yeah, it's changed a lot. I mean, we travel to, between Chris and I, we probably travel to 75-80% of the away games every year, and we find that is a super useful thing because when you go on the road, players really appreciate that you're there. There's less places for them to hide, when you're in the clubhouse and all that type of stuff. And so you can really get good stories on the road. Spring training is an amazing time to network because it's very laid back. There's no pressure, and you have a ton of time in the clubhouse. So that was big to miss out on. And doing everything over Zoom and just being detached. I remember, last year, and I don't know yet because we're still a couple days away, but last year we were just so separated to the point where like we had to go up certain ramps and go in the press box and that was it. And like you couldn't really see anybody else, couldn't talk to anybody else. And like I remember, like I a couple things. I was walking down the ramp one night, and when Michael Chavis was walking down, he said, "Hey, it's good to see you." Me and another reporter, Julian McWilliams from the Globe, we were just talking, and Chavis ended up walking out at the same time. It's like, this is weird actually talking to you guys. Like, I don't know if this is allowed just because we ran into each other. Like that's crazy to think about. Like that one interaction with a player, and like Kevin Plawecki got his hair cut right next to me one day at the barbershop right near here. So I was thinking like, and I had now covered him for almost a full season, or that many months. Obviously, it wasn't a full season, and I realized, sitting there like he definitely doesn't know who I am, right? Like, there's no way he would, because we're not in the clubhouse. We're all, he's talked on Zoom probably twice as the backup catcher. So those types of things were like, even guys that have been with the Red Sox, like, at this point, normally Alex Verdugo would really pretty much know everybody on the beat, have some sort of relationship with them. And I don't think that's happened, not any fault of his or any fault of ours, just the way it is. Because the real value to what we do is going in, having those informal conversations, and that's been impossible.
Yeah, I talked with Mark Daniels for my first episode, a New England Patriots beat reporter for the Providence Journal.
Mm-hmm.
He had a similar experience of not being able to go into the locker room at Gillette and talk with all the players there and just have a conversation.
Right.
Did you have a similar experience? So Mark talked about how a lot of the post-game interviews and a lot of the interviews, as we see on this podcast, is over Zoom.
Right.
And Mark mentioned that a lot of reporters were only kind of forced to ask one question because,
Mm-hmm.
as we know on Zoom, kind of the raise hand function, and whoever gets there first gets there first. So did you have that same experiences kind of with Zoom post-game interviews, et cetera, with, let's say, like Alex Cora, Bogarts, or even Verdugo?
Yeah, I think the Patriots do it a little bit differently, where they call on certain people, and so we have like, the free reign, which it is good and bad. A lot of times we're all talking over each other, which, it's just, I guess, what Zoom is. It's like
Yeah.
the progressive commercial where everybody is talking over each other. It's exactly what it's like. But I think it is different, and I think one thing that's huge is like, if a player says something interesting in the group setting, which happens a lot, you're going to see it in the Herald, the Globe, MassLive, Providence Journal, Nesson, ESPN, everywhere. And like the beauty of having the clubhouse access is being able to go up and get 10 minutes with a guy and one-on-one. If you go up to a guy in the clubhouse and you're alone, you have your recorder out and you're doing an interview, there's a rule. It's not a written rule anywhere, but everybody knows, like, all right, well, Chris is talking to that guy, we can't go up and join. That just doesn't really exist. It's a lot harder. I got Christian Arroyo, Red Sox infielder, over the phone the other day for like 25 minutes, and he did he answered all my questions. It was great. And I was like, I just felt like different, because I felt like I have this story, like nobody else does, just because I was able to get him one-on-one. It was like a rare feeling, even though it used to happen like every day. So yeah, I think it's just totally changed. It's so much harder to stand out from your competition. It's so much harder to make relationships, but it's so much harder to get the good stories that nobody else is trying to do. So it's a constant challenge. So hopefully we'll be able to do some socially distanced one-on-ones during the season, and hopefully once vaccinations are rolled out, we'll all be able to start traveling again and really get back to actually what makes the job fun and what makes it rewarding.
Yeah, that's interesting because, like I said, Mark had a similar experience. He talked about how, I mean, if everyone's all on the same Zoom and only kind of linked to one question, then everyone's going to have this, like you said, the same content, all talking about Cam Newton's same quote.
Yep.
So it's not going to be unique. Everyone's going to be talking about the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it really is interesting how the pandemic has kind of made a challenge for writers to kind of be unique and try to find different angles to talk about. So kind of segueing a little bit, like, as I'm an aspiring sports reporter myself, how important is it for aspiring sports reporters to just write different kind of stories instead of just always writing news stories, features, or just going actually into more features, analytical stuff, etc. Can you talk about that aspect?
Yeah, it sounds like a theme of a sports writing workshop to me. But
I'm gonna make that promo a little bit later for you, but we'll keep that for the audience later.
Yeah, I mean, well, as you know, it's a big piece of it. That's always
Yeah.
something that, when I give that advice, I give it because I know the pitfalls of, like, for a couple of years in college, I was like focused on breaking news, trying to get things and get source things and try to break signings and do this and this and this. And, you when you become one dimensional, you become, that super cliche, but a one trick pony. Like, there's not a lot of value in just doing that one thing. Over and over and over again. So trying to diversify the portfolio, and I know you've heard that exact phrase many times, but it's, writing features, writing columns, writing the analytical number stuff, doing a breaking news day. I mean, for example, today I've been in breaking news, texting sources, trying to get scoops mode all day for whatever reason, and gotten some, kind of struck out on some others, and just kind of going through that process. The whole Matt Barnes getting cleared thing, we were the first to kind of write about that possibility this morning. I didn't nail it down completely as much as the New York Post did, but we were very close, and we're first on that, which is, one of the rare ways you can stand apart from the competition in the COVID world. So, yeah, it's super important, just, for any young writer. Like, it's like, another cliche, but like a golfer who has a great short game and they're great at putting, so they're just going to practice putting, like, and they suck at driving, so they're never going to do it. Like, it's a lot harder to practice the things that you aren't as strong at, but it's so much more important, So, yeah, that's like when I challenge myself to write an opinion column or a long feature, like the Arroyo one. It's a little bit different than my bread and butter, which is the breaking news and quick churning stuff out. But it's super important to kind of handle all aspects of the job like that.
Yeah, definitely. Because as someone as a sports editor for my school newspaper and at Stonehill College in Easton, Massachusetts, something I've been trying to do. Kind of been writing a lot of, like you said, news stories and being one dimensional. I'm really good at doing that, but trying to push myself, do feature stories, do analytical stories, etc. Um, and it really does help show like a wide portfolio when you do go out and try to look for a job, but whether for it's a newspaper or be a specific beat writer for an online news. So kind of shifting in this aspiring sports journalist realm. What advice would you give for people, whether it's not even in college or just say like a high school, like when you were a senior, what tools they could use on whether joining like a website like SB Nation or just writing for their school newspaper? What advice would you give to young aspiring sports reporters in that realm?
It's, I think it really depends on exactly what someone wants in that situation. I think there's always that balance between, trying to get a big platform where you're maybe not going to be able to write what you want. I've seen that happen a lot where if someone gets hired to a pretty notable site, they have a structure and they're kind of painted into a corner. I would say that it's important not to do that alone. What made the SB Nation thing cool for me is, we had the expectation that we're going to cover the transactions of baseball at MLB Daily Dish, which is where I was. And cover the transactions, all that type of stuff. But at the same time, I had free reign. If I wanted to do a long feature, if I wanted to do a column, any of those types of things, I could. And so having that flexibility, like one of my biggest pieces of advice is don't be somewhere where you're painted into a corner. I think that's super important, and realize that sometimes places have editors or papers have editors where they're going to try to keep you in a certain mold and not allow you to really expand as a writer and gain reps in different areas. So just try to find ways to, like I said, diversify what you do. Try to find ways to stand out from the crowd. Social media is a great way to do that and get as many eyeballs on your work as possible, because you never know who's going to be able to see it.
Yeah, definitely. And um, something I wanted to note, because as you mentioned before, kind of was in your workshop and something you said in that workshop that I just immediately kept in my mind for the rest of the workshop and for now is in baseball players can hit 200 etc, but when you're a reporter you got to make sure you're
Mm-hmm.
hitting 99 to 1,000, so making
Yep.
sure everything's correct. So talk about how important it is for young aspiring sports reporters to really make sure and fact check things for their articles and stories, whether it's breaking news or any kind of story.
Super important. You're trying to build up reader trust in your work. I think that's always super important. For me, today, just, I mean, this is on my mind because it was 5 hours ago, but with the Matt Barnes story, like we were trying to figure out how to word that all day long, trying to figure out how to, we were told it's a false positive, and then it came out that, he was cleared, which is kind of what I thought was going to happen. But they said, people were saying it's not a false positive, it's a non-infectious positive, which I don't even know what that means. I don't think anybody knows what that means. And, like to me, I'm trying to figure out where did the process break down where like I used the wrong term. Like I want to be super clear because there's people, that are delineating between those two things. And from what I've gathered so far, it sounds like maybe Major League Baseball doesn't want to admit that its tests aren't 100%. But so I've left it. But that kind of thing, it's like, even obsessing over the language, I think is important. Today, the first call I got on that, hey, Matt Barnes had a false positive and they're all getting cleared. This is supposed to be a 10-day thing where the Red Sox are going to be without like 5 or 6 key players on opening day and for the first weekend of the season. And all of a sudden, I get this tip like, oh, this is a big deal. I'm not going to rush it out. I texted probably 15 people, trying to get that story immediately. None of 14 didn't get back to me. One of them did, but it was a little bit loose. So I just ran this is a consideration, but it's not definite. And Joel Sherman from the New York Post said Matt Barnes and the rest of the Red Sox have been cleared. He definitively broke the story that I was pretty sure about earlier on, but I wasn't 100%, so I wasn't going to run it. That's just, more important and better to be second and correct than, first and wrong. So it sucks a little bit. But that's why, I was careful with the language I used all day, but that's just, one example of all the time, you never, there's different free agents you could look at and see like, oh, I think they're signing with this person. I'm 95% sure, but until I'm 100% sure, I'm not going to risk it. And it's always that temptation of being first because then you get the credit associated with being first and all that. And obviously that's, a major high for any reporter to try to get that and beat that. And I know that from, the Doug Fister thing and Ricky Nolasco thing like we talked about. But it's not worth potentially being wrong. So that's a huge piece. And, a lot of the people that have taken the workshop that I've talked to, I've, talked to behind the scenes about, hey, I have this. Is this enough to go on? Be like, no, you probably need more. Like, go get another source. And sometimes it turns out that person they were talking to wasn't reliable. So just comes with experience, of trying to figure out who you can trust, who's in the know. Everybody has their own process, but I think keeping your process to the highest standard possible is really important.
Yeah, one thing you also said in the workshop is everyone's gonna obviously see the stories you do right, but that one story that you do wrong or you mess up, everyone's gonna remember that one time you messed up, like you said, whether it's like a trade or something like Matt Barnes saying that he has COVID when maybe he might not have COVID or etc. So it really is important, like you said, to kind of stay on top and make sure in second chance, even though you might not be the first one to report it, but that
Yeah.
you had all your things right at the end of the day.
Right.
But shifting gears here, as you are a Red Sox reporter, I thought it'd be kind of interesting to talk a little bit about the Red Sox. As I said before in the beginning of this podcast, this episode's being recorded on March 29th, so a couple days from opening day for the Red Sox.
Mm-hmm.
So with opening day around the corner, in your reporting so far of the team throughout spring training, where do you see this Red Sox team as many Red Sox fans are kind of hoping to see the revival of the Red Sox team that we saw in 2018 maybe, and kind of go back into the playoffs and maybe a World Series run as well?
Yeah, I have them at 86 wins, finishing third place in the East. I just think that the Rays and Yankees are still above them. I think a lot of people think the Blue Jays are too. So people think they could be fourth, but I think they're going to be a fun team to watch. I think they're going to be in the mix for a playoff spot, and I think they need to be just in terms of fan interest. People are starting. It might be just because my whole Twitter feed's baseball obsessed people, obviously, but I feel like people are starting to get excited again. Fans coming back, normalcy, 162 game schedule, opening day, April 1st, kind of a national holiday feel to it. But if the Red Sox are like 3-13 out of the gate, nobody's going to care about them anymore. And they didn't care about them last year. They didn't care for most of the second half of 19. A lot of fans are still upset about the Mookie Betts trade, as everybody knows, even though it was the right move. And I think that that's a big piece of it. Like they need to try to stay relevant. I know it's not really at the forefront for them of they want to, they have this long goal they're building towards, but it'll be a lot more fun of a summer for around here, especially for just my job. I don't ever care, like I've said before, and I don't ever care if they win or lose. But I think in terms of appeasing the fan base, need to be competitive for a while, and I think they will be. They added a lot of pieces. You look at the moves they made, and there's nothing unbelievably flashy. The biggest guaranteed contract they gave out, I think, was 2 years and 14 million for Kike Hernandez. There's no deals were longer than 2 years, but this is a team that was counting on you're basically getting Eduardo Rodriguez back, which I know there's a little hiccup recently, but that's going to happen. They're going to get Chris Sale back at some point. JD Martinez might bounce into form, like all those types of things. So there's a lot of question marks, but they have the potential to be really good. So I think my message to fans would be just give them a chance, because you never know.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. I'll be honest. I was one of those that kind of counted them out last year as it started to go downhill and kind of turned it off. And
they were horrendous. So you were not wrong to do so.
It was tough to watch, and especially having
tough to watch in person.
Seeing their run in 2018 and then going to that, it was definitely tough to watch. But
yes,
you kind of mentioned my next question about the little hiccup with, as we saw with Eduardo Rodriguez, and now Chris Sale coming off of Tommy John and still kind of having some neck soreness. So I mean, what is it the organization talks around the organization been around starting pitching rotation with already a lot of question marks and hiccups, as you said?
It's the focus and the theme has been depth. It's not just the starting five that you see of Rodriguez, Evaldi, Richards, Pivetta, and Martin Perez. Like, there's Tanner Houck, who's waiting in the wings, Matt Andriese, Garrett Whitlock, the Rule 5 pick. So now you're all of a sudden 8 deep. Brian Mata's hurt, so he's not going to factor in, but Connor Siebold will be at AAA, so he's number 9. And then by the end of the year, you can add Sale 10 and Mata 11. You have 11 probably capable starting pitchers. Last year, once Erod and Sale were ruled out, we saw it. It was Evaldi Perez and Ryan Weber and Matt Hall. Ryan Weber was probably 5th or 6th on the depth chart last year, and now he's 12th or 13th. And he's still in the organization. Nobody's even heard about him. Matt Hall, the same type of thing. So I think just that, the amount of depth they added, Houck being major league ready. He's not going to be there at the beginning of the season, but he will be ready. Andriese and Whitlock come into the organization. Richards, Perez gets re-signed. Siebold comes over in that trade with Pivetta. So they have room where, say, Garrett Richards for some reason is horrible, they can maybe move him to the bullpen or DFA him, and okay, Tanner Houck comes up, and you saw what he did at the end of last year. So I think that's the key. They have just a lot more capable arms than they had in 2020, and probably even more than they did in 2019 when Chris Sale and David Price got hurt and they started having to cover with Brian Johnson, Hector Velasquez, those types of guys. So I think that's a huge upgrade for them, and I think that really can't be overstated.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel for the Boston Red Sox, it's always been kind of issues with depth, especially in the bullpen and reliever positions. Kind of starters being able to get through the games, but unfortunately not having that depth in the bullpen to come through and deliver. So, has the bullpen kind of increased this year? As you said, it talked about a little bit depth, and as we see, I mean, unfortunately, Barnes is kind of down at the moment with COVID-19, but they still have Valdez. They're hopefully looking to add Hector Rondon, which would add another piece. How crucial has it been for their bullpen to kind of stack up on the depth side of things?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Felix Valdez, who was like their best reliever for most of last year, and now he's battling for a spot. So luckily, if they had the chance that Barnes, Andriese, and Garrett Whitlock would all be out, and I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're all going to be ready for opening day now that they've been cleared with the false positive. So kind of a miracle, but it happened. So they're happy with that. You're looking at Barnes, a new look back of the bullpen. Barnes and Ottavino, one of them's going to be the closer. Unclear who. Sawamura coming over from Japan. They're really high on him. He'll pitch in probably the 7th. And then you have those 2 lefties who were such a crucial part of Alex Cora's bullpen in 2019, and Darwinson Hernandez and Josh Taylor. Matt Andriese and Garrett Whitlock are going to give you middle of the game depth options and starting depth options, like I talked about, long-term guys. And then Ryan Brazier's back. He's hurt right now, but he'll be back at some point. So I do think they have some high-end talent there, especially with Ottavino, Barnes, and Sawamura, Darwinson, and Taylor. But I think If there's a couple injuries, we saw even with Brazier injured, you're looking at Colton Brewer or Phillips Valdez now. If Barnes was down, you're going to be even dipping further into that. So, at some point, relievers are a dime a dozen, but I still think, they're going to be aggressive. We talked about Rondon. They're in on Steve Cishek, who is going to be signing a major league deal somewhere else probably by the end of the time we're done recording. So it will be, I don't know where that's going to be. But they've been kind of in the market for a veteran. Who knows if they'll land one, but I still think they could add a little bit more depth to the bullpen, especially if Brazier's going to be out for a little while.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting this Red Sox season. Like I said before, Red Sox usually kind of have a couple, like we mentioned before, one or two, maybe three, sometimes four key starting pitchers, but it's usually been kind of those late game issues of the bullpen kind of closing out the game. So, as for me, that's one of the highlights, one of the points I'm definitely looking on this season, because I think the offensive side of things is going to kind of go back to what we've seen when the whole Betts era and Ortiz, et cetera, kind of producing hits, as we've seen throughout spring training and as you've seen throughout your coverage on spring training. So to kick off the last question here, as I mentioned like multiple times as we talked about, it's opening day coming up. What are you looking towards on being back into Fenway, being able to get back into that press box and report on the Boston Red Sox?
Yeah, I mean, we were there last year I was able to do 14 games, and like I said, it was just super weird. Like you go up and it's super sterile, and there's like 5 security guards there. So just having life and energy and the fans there. I know it's only going to be 4,500, but it's super exciting that they're going to be there and you can hear the crowd noise and all that type of stuff. So I'm looking forward to that. Hopefully, like I said, it just keep expanding throughout the year. Traveling's huge, like I mentioned. Yeah, I feel like it's going to be this gradual kind of spectrum of normalcy or normality, wherever the hell the word is that we're going to be on. So looking forward to that a lot. It's been a very long winter, especially that they're out of it or weren't in the playoffs and couldn't do much other than kind of wait for the season to start. And then spring training not being down there, it makes the off season even 6 weeks longer. So it'll be great. It'll be awesome. I've got Thursday circled on my calendar for a while, so I can't wait.
Yeah, I don't believe you're the only one having that day circled on your calendar in Boston, the Boston area, New England area. A lot of fans are probably definitely excited to get back into Fenway Park and just watch a game again. It's like you said, it's been weird, and we're kind of inching finally towards that normalcy, the normal. So, but that kicks it off for this episode. I just want to first do a little promo because, as I mentioned before, I did a little workshop that Chris offers. Almost every year. I did it last February. It's a 3-week workshop for aspiring sports reporters out there, where he talks about various topics from breaking news, feature writing, interviewing, covering a beat, and even doing something what we're doing right now, a podcast. So if you're an aspiring sports reporter out there, I'd really advise you to take a look into this. If it sounds interesting to you, you can reach out to Chris by his email at by Chris Cotillo. That's Chris CHRIS Cotillo COTILLO at gmail.com for more info. His next workshop goes from April 12th to the 26th, and there's, like I said, 3 2-hour workshops. It's great session. I learned a lot, and he even has great guests. In the last workshop that I was in, he had Ken Rosenhall, one of the baseball's top reporters in the league. So it was great to hear from him, hear his journey, and just get additional insight from someone who's worked his way throughout the industry. So anything else to add about your workshop, Chris?
No, that's it. Hopefully this group will be as good as yours was because I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, it was a good group. Really great workshop to make connections, et cetera. And like I said, gain additional insights. So, but thank you, Chris, so much for hopping on my show today. I really appreciate it. I know you're pretty busy with the Red Sox going through opening day and a lot of reports with the whole Matt Barnes situation. And then, so, but thank you again. And that's it for episode 3. Make sure you hit a like on the video and subscribe to my channel. And we'll see you in the next video. Goodbye, everybody.